Welcome to this special sanctuary today where we're honoring, um, the end of Advent and our journey into Christmas, which is coming in just a few more days. And I thought for today's sanctuary, since we won't all get to be together on Christmas, I wanted to take the time today, though, to share with you some of the symbolism of this story and whether or not we're Christian or not, whether or not we may even celebrate it in this way, like any powerful spiritual story from any tradition, it's very rich in possibility for our own journey. So I found this to be true in even with stories and traditions that I'm not a part of. So I know that this can work. So I just want to encourage and invite anyone joining today or anyone watching this video later that even if you're not Christian or you don't associate yourself with that at all, the story actually is much bigger than any one tradition. So my invitation is just to be open to see what this imagery from the stories means for you and for your own journey of transformation. Why spiritual stories can be so powerful for us is because they speak in the language of our subconscious. And that's the part of us that has to engage in any kind of transformation. And most of you joining or watching know that by now, that unless our subconscious is on board, not a lot of change can happen in our life. So spiritual stories really speak in symbolism and metaphors, in that beautiful language of myth that our subconscious can resonate with and feel into and be transformed by. So um, and before I sort of share my take on this story, I want to just invite you to think of it like a piece of art. There's not just one way to interpret or understand this story. I'm giving you my best understanding of it today, but you'll all have your own, and there isn't just one way. That's the beautiful thing about art or myth or story. Um, and we began that journey a couple of weeks ago when we started talking about this season of Advent. And those of you that were on the sanctuary 2 weeks ago, we started this reflection back then of like, what would it be like to place ourselves in the story of this Advent season? And in particular, last time we looked at what would it look like to feel that we also, like Mary in the story, were pregnant, waiting, making space in this, what the mystics called cave of the heart, this dark, quiet inner womb. And Advent, in a way, these weeks leading up to Christmas, as I said last time, are really a powerful opportunity to hibernate a bit and come inward as a way to prepare ourselves for what's to come, for this birth. And we all know, growing up in this culture that we grew up in, that what's to come in the story is this special birth, right? The birth of the Christ child, as it's called in this tradition. And for billions of people on the planet, that symbolizes the birth of Jesus, the Son of God, becoming human. And so for today, I want to see what else does that symbolize for us, for our own journey of transformation. And there was a German mystic many years ago, 14th century German mystic, Meister Eckhart, who said something that to me is sort of the core of what we'll be doing here today. And he said, this was very blasphemous, by the way, but I hope you'll take his meaning of what he meant from it. He said, what good is Christ to me unless I find that I am Christ, that I am a child of God, and that we are all sons and daughters of God. And here this mystic gives us a clue about an additional way to view this story of the Christ child, right? To let this powerful metaphor work on us from the inside. And one of the ways we can hold that metaphor is to look into the story of Christmas from the perspective of seeing that we're not just looking at a Christ over there, that we're also invited to recognize in the story a symbol of our own divinity, that eternal spark of God within us. And virtually every tradition on the planet has a name for that spark of the divine, right? Buddhists call it our true nature. Hindus call it Atman. In the Christian tradition, it's Christ. And as one of my teachers, Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan priest and also a mystic, as he likes to say, when we speak of Advent or preparing for Christmas, we're not just talking about waiting for the little baby Jesus to be born. That already happened 2,000 years ago. What we're doing is welcoming the universal Christ, the cosmic Christ, the Christ that lives and is forever being born into this human experience and in our lives. Very different way to hold it and understand it. And that birth in the Christian tradition and the Christmas story is called the incarnation. And the incarnation, literally from the Latin incarno, is in, the prefix in, and cardo, flesh. And so you put those two together, and it's the literal meaning is to make into flesh. And with that word, we're given a lot of clues about the spiritual direction of this particular story, which is a down and in movement, as I like to call it. God, spirit, divinity, love, whatever word you want to give to that presence, becoming human, incarnating, the divine presence manifesting through and inside of this material human world. And why is that so important for our own journey of transformation? I think it's important because, unfortunately, for most people, myself included, there's been this sort of unfortunate split, division between the material world and the spiritual aspects of ourselves. We kind of have this notion that the divine is somewhere else, someplace else. And frankly, religion hasn't really helped much with that. If anything, a lot of religion seeks to enhance that division, if you will. And many of us have been conditioned, even by religion, to somehow believe that we're cut off from that presence, or that we have to do something to become something to be restored with that presence. But this Christmas story, when we look at the deeper meaning of it, can have us flip that idea on its head, right? The Christmas story is showing us in this metaphorical way what it looks like for divinity to reside right at the heart of the human condition. And that's the gift of it for me, that the incarnation helps me to remember that God, presence, light, truth is shining through right here, right now, right in the midst of my human unconsciousness, right in the midst of the times when I feel disconnected, right in the midst of our anger or our ignorance or our struggles, right? It's the divine shining through in this unbelievable chaos and neurosis that is our human experience. And that's a very different way for me to hold it. The Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the lesser known Gospels, one of the Gnostic Gospels, there's a line in there where Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth, and we do not see it." And that to me speaks of sort of one of the epidemics of this culture that we live in, this notion that the kingdom is somewhere else, that there's this place in the future that maybe one day we'll be qualified to get there, right? And so what that does is it cuts us off from the heaven right here, the kingdom right here. And when we're cut off from that, we live in sort of this feeling of isolation from our true self, right? From our true nature, from our own inherent goodness. And we kind of fall into what I would say is one of the primary illnesses of human beings, this sense that there's something wrong with us, that there's something fundamentally incomplete, unworthy. As you guys all know, I've worked with thousands of people, and I pretty much have found that in almost everyone I've worked with, myself included in that equation, right? That there's this feeling inside that we all have of deep inadequacy, deep unworthiness. Again, I think is the best word to sum that up with. And I think that that is one of the greatest illusions that the Christmas story can help our subconscious heal, right? That the Christmas story can be, if we allow it to work on us, can be a powerful reminder of who we really are, right? Who we really are, that light that we are, that light that can never be earned, can never be taken away, has nothing to do with the externals of our life. Um, because the sense of worthiness or unworthiness as we experience it often has to do with the externals of our life. I'm not a good enough this, I'm not a good enough that. I didn't do that as well as I should have, right? Those sort of messages we send ourselves often have to do with externals. And the Christmas story is pointing us, kind of pointing us back to this, what the Christians call our fundamental identity. Our fundamental identity is seen in this story, in this baby, in this manger, that all of these people had a moment of seeing the recognition of what they called the Christ. And, you know, that to me is kind of the fulcrum that the story centers around and that we're invited into too. How can we use this time of winter and this time of Christmas coming to remind ourselves that we are that blessing, that that's not just for one person at one moment in time, but that's for all of us. um, and the Christmas story also, in addition to that, helps us to recognize that that one incarnation, which is really all of our incarnations, that one sort of pouring forth of divinity becoming human, isn't an accident, isn't a random act, but it's actually a very intentional act of love. We've heard those words, those of you that are Christian have heard those words so many times. For God so loved the world that he gave his son. And those beautiful words again can be interpreted at so many different levels, but I like to really feel into the first part of that phrase, right? The divine loving this world of form so much that it incarnates into it. And it does that purposely as an act of love. Just like out of love that Mary in the Christmas story says yes to probably the scariest invitation of her life. And you all, everybody in this session, me included, we've all had a moment in our life where out of love, out of devotion to something bigger than ourselves, we've said yes, right? We've said yes at great sacrifice. We've said yes when it was scary. We've said yes when we didn't know how it would turn out. And often we did that out of love, love for something bigger than ourselves. You parents have done it countless times for your children, right? You've stretched yourselves beyond anything imaginable out of love. And I want to invite us today, and we'll be going into a practice of this in a moment, to consider that it's out of love that we're here. I know that's, for some of you, maybe, I don't quite get that, or I don't quite believe that. And that's okay. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just asking you to open to the possibility that this very incarnation that is you is a creative act, a loving act, an act of presence, pouring forth its presence to create you, to cause you, to literally call you into being. And that's what we're here to do, right? That we're called to continue to pour forth those qualities into being in our lives with the people that we encounter. Then we're not just looking down at one baby in a manger. We're actually recognizing that, oh my gosh, we too are this Christ child. We too are anointed, blessed, chosen, and cherished. And that's to me the axis on which the Christmas story rotates, is what I call original blessing. And that's what we're invited to remember and reconnect to at Christmas, this original identity, right? This original identity as a child of the divine, not because of what we do, not because of how we look, not because of, this achievement or that achievement or how much money we have in our bank account or don't have, but actually because this is our original identity. And you all have experienced this, even if maybe haven't given that name to it. You all have experienced this when you've been around a newborn, right? There's something in that newborn, a taste of the timeless, a taste of the eternal that is shining through those eyes of that baby that you know, without having to read any book or believe any creed, is a holy being, right? Before that baby did anything right or wrong, or got good grades, or got this achievement, or had that failure, there was an original goodness that you felt, you've seen, you've known that. And that original goodness is what the Christmas story is pointing us back to. Hey, remember this. Remember this. Remember that the greatest gift to unwrap this season is the gift of who you actually are, your presence. And sometimes that's hard for us because of that unworthiness. It's hard for us to connect to that. And so sometimes it's easier, the journey is easier to feel it first in another person or another being. And I know every one of you has someone in your own life that you've felt this for, right? It could be maybe one of your children or a grandchild, or it could be a dear friend of yours where you've just seen and known that original goodness. Could be a partner, maybe even a pet. That light shines through our pets in an uninhibited way. So I want to invite you just for a few minutes to think of someone in your life where you've experienced what I'm calling that original goodness, that original blessing. Just for a moment, consider, maybe there's many people, but for the purpose of this exercise, think of someone where you really feel that strongly, where you can actually see in them this energy of the divine shining through. And I want to invite you, if you have some paper or a pen nearby, you could write about this or not. You could just reflect inwardly. If you were going to remind this person of the blessing that they are, what would you say to them? What would you tell them? As if you were writing them a letter. And if you have a paper and pen, you could even just craft a short, rough letter to this person or to this pet. What would you say? How would you use words to remind them of this original identity? So take a few moments to write about that or reflect about that. Another minute. Anything else you would tell them to help, again, to help them remember this original blessing that they are? So, just taking a half a minute or so to finish that little reflection or that note. And if you're writing, you can just set your pen down again. I would encourage you, if you did write this to someone in your life who's still here with you, to share this with them. That is actually one of the greatest gifts we can give each other, is the reminder, the recognition and reminder of this original blessing. There was a priest by the name of Henry Nouwen who is no longer alive, but he worked in a Canadian organization. For you Canadians, I think this was a Canadian or a French organization that then moved to Canada. It's called La Arche. And these are homes where special needs individuals, like my son Kai, where special needs individuals as adults live in a home together with just people like you and I, neurotypical people, as they're called in the special needs world. And this priest was living in one of these homes with these very neurologically challenged adults. And there's a story of this girl coming to the priest and saying to the priest, I really want a blessing. And so Henry Nouwen gives her sort of the traditional Catholic blessing. She says, no, I don't, that's not what I want. I want a blessing. And he did his thing, and she, no, I want a blessing. And he finally got what this meant. He remembered this whole notion of what we're talking about today, reminding people of their divinity. And so he gave her this sort of verbal mirroring of who she was. And it just rocked her world. And then all of the other individuals in the house sort of lined up behind her. I want a blessing too. And so he spent the rest of his life dedicated to blessing people, and wrote a beautiful book called The Beloved, which talks about this need in humanity to remember that we're blessed. And he shares that that is one of the greatest things we can give each other. We're so quick with our criticisms in this culture. We have no problem doling those out. How often do we dole out blessings? How often do we really dole out those words that could heal somebody, reminding them of who they are? So I encourage you this season, as you're giving your gifts, to consider that this is probably one of the greatest gifts you could give the people in your lives, is just the recognition of, I see you. I see you. And this is how I've been blessed by you in my life. So from putting that focus outward, we're going to go on a little inward journey and open ourselves a little more deeply to the same recognition of our original blessing. So I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably. We'll be doing a little visualization here. So get yourself in a comfortable position where you can sit for a few minutes. And allow your eyes to close. Just take a couple deeper breaths. And in whatever way you connect with this sense of the divine, whatever that is for you, I want to invite you just for a moment to call on that presence. To call on that grace to help you remember this original blessing that you are. And now just imagine for a moment that you're getting a little bit younger. We're going to go back in time, going back, getting younger. And imagine that this divine presence, whatever that is for you, brings you all the way back to the moment of your own incarnation, your birth. And that this divine presence helps you to see that birth now in a different way. To see that that birth, that incarnation, you coming into existence as this innocent newborn, was a profound act of love, a profound outpouring of divinity into humanity. Just sense for a moment, sense or feel or even see that your experience of entering this world is coded in this beautiful embrace, in this knowing that you are a most precious child of love itself. See, sense, or feel your very incarnating as a blessing. God, divinity, offering you up as a blessing, as a profound act of love into this world. And let that feeling of blessedness, that feeling of warmth, of love, of light to just spread down from the top of your head through your whole body. Letting this presence help you remember who you are, who you came in as, cherished, precious, chosen by life, chosen by presence itself. Just breathing into that for a moment. And if it's hard to experience it, that's okay. Just opening ourselves to whatever degree we can. And we can even pray, help me know this original identity. Help me know my original blessing. And feel that blessedness soak into yourself even more, into your cells, into your body. Feeling that the core of your existence is this expression of divine goodness. That you are created by love. That you are created as love. And that you are here on this earth right now for love, to be that instrument. Keep letting that sink in for a few more moments, just allowing yourself that recognition. This is who I am. This is who I was created to be.
You were made in the name of love, a precious gift from grace above. Don't believe the stories saying otherwise. Who you are is waiting to be realized. You are love, you are loved, you are already enough. You are whole, you are holy, you are always held in glory. You were born in the light of truth. God poured out everything to make you an original blessing. Original blessing. An original blessing. Original blessing.
Breathing that in for a moment, that remembrance of the blessing that you are. Letting that just sink in deeper into your cells, into your heart. And in a moment when we take our water, our holy water, and we bless ourselves, let yourself do that with this recognition of blessing yourself to remember who it is I really am underneath all of the personas or images. What is my core identity? There's a pastor out of New York City, and I'd like to use her words to help us bless ourselves. So go ahead and grab your water to give yourself a blessing, and we'll do that with her words here. What if every human being is anointed, messiahed, Christ? What if the most fundamental aspect of our identity is that we are each anointed and appointed by the Holy One? What if we took seriously being the hands, the feet, and the heartbeat of the living God? What if we are Word made flesh, love made flesh, and light made flesh? So as you offer yourself this blessing, let it anoint you. Let it remind you that you are indeed anointed, that you are indeed chosen, cherished, and blessed.